The great silver dome of the Galactic Interspecies Academy shone under the light of two suns. Inside, the halls were filled with the sounds of many different kinds of life. There were clicks and hums and the shuffling of feet and other limbs. Students from all over the known galaxy moved to their classes. They were the best and the brightest. In one of these halls walked Instructor Kale. He was a Zarkon, tall and slender. His body was covered in smooth, dark gray plates that looked like stone. He had 4 arms, which he used with graceful precision, and his head had 2 large dark eyes that saw everything. He was a respected teacher of advanced tactical analysis. His class was for the most promising young minds. Today, like every day, he entered his classroom. It was a wide, circular room. A large, glowing star map floated in the middle. The students' desks were arranged in a circle around it. The room was already noisy. A group of Tellurian students were having a loud debate. Their green, flexible arms waved in the air as they argued about ship formations. Their voices were high and fast. Not far from them, 3 Vril students stood together. They did not speak with words. They made a low, soft humming sound. They were sharing thoughts directly, their feathery antennae gently touching. This was how they learned. Kale's eyes moved to the other side of the room. This is where he always found the 3 human students. Their names were Jin, Min, and Hana. And as always, they were sitting perfectly still and perfectly silent. Jin was a young man with black hair and calm eyes. He sat straight in his chair, his hands resting on the desk. He was looking at the star map, but his face showed no expression. He was not frowning in thought. He was not smiling. He was just watching. Next to him was Min. He was a bit taller than Jin, and he had a habit of keeping his gaze lowered, as if studying the floor. But Kale had seen him in simulations. When Min looked up, his eyes missed nothing. Right now, though, he was as still as a rock. The 3rd human was Hana. She had long, dark hair tied back neatly. She was the one who would sometimes write a short note on a small screen she carried. But she never spoke out of turn. She listened to every word spoken in the room, her head tilted just a little. Kale began the lesson. He presented a problem on the floating star map. It was a classic tactical puzzle. A small, fast fleet had to defend a large, slow station from a bigger enemy force. Immediately, the Tellurian students started talking over each other. A direct assault on the enemy's left side. One of them cried out, pointing a long finger at the map. They are weak there. No, that is a trap, argued another. We must use the station's own guns for cover. The Vril students hummed louder. One of them stepped forward and used a light pen to draw a complex path around the station. It was a clever circling maneuver. Kale nodded. A good solution. It uses the station's shadow for hiding. He turned to the rest of the class. Does anyone see a weakness in this plan? The room erupted again with ideas and arguments. Kale encouraged it. This was how learning happened. You shared your thoughts. You defended them. You learned from the clash of different minds. His eyes drifted back to the 3 humans. They had not moved. They were listening. He could see that. Their eyes were active following the conversation. But they did not speak. They did not raise a hand. They did not even whisper to each other. This was the puzzle. This was what the other teachers called the human problem. Humans were new to the galaxy. They were clever. Their technology was good. But in social settings, especially in classes like this, they were so quiet. Many of the other species saw this silence as a sign that humans were not creative. Or maybe they were shy. Or perhaps they did not understand the complex topics. But Kale had checked their test scores. Jin, Min, and Hana had the highest grades in the class. Their simulation results were perfect. When he called on them directly, their answers were always correct. They were never wrong. But their answers were also very short. They never explained their thinking. They just stated the fact. Today, the silence of the 3 humans felt heavier than usual. The rest of the class was a storm of noise and movement. Jin, Min, and Hana were the calm, quiet eye of that storm. Kyle decided he had to know. He had to understand. The class ended. The Tellurians were still arguing as they packed their bags and left. The Vril hummed their way out the door. The humans stood up quietly. They moved with a smooth, efficient grace. No wasted motion. Jin, Min, Hana, Kyle said, his voice echoing slightly in the now empty room. A moment, please. The 3 humans turned. They walked over to his desk and stood before him. They did not look nervous. They did not look curious. They just waited. Your work is very good, Kale began, choosing his words with care. He folded his two upper arms. Your answers on the last test were perfect. Thank you, instructor, Hannah said. Her voice was soft and even. But, Kyle continued, I have a concern. In class you do not speak. You do not debate. You do not share your ideas with the others. In our culture and in most cultures here, talking and arguing is how we learn. It shows that our minds are active. Your silence. It worries me. The others may think you are not engaged. The three humans looked at each other. It was a very quick look. It was not a look of fear or shame. It was a look of understanding. It was as if they had expected this conversation. Jin was the one who spoke. We are engaged, instructor. We are listening. Listening is not enough, Kyle said, trying to be gentle. You must also participate. You must show your thinking. It is our training, Min said quietly. His eyes were still on the floor, but his voice was clear. Training? Kale asked. What kind of training tells you to be silent? Hannah shook her head slightly. Not to be silent. To listen, to observe. The classroom is an environment full of information. The problem on the screen is one piece of data. The reactions of the other students are another. Their proposed solutions, their confidence, their mistakes. It is all data. We are processing that data. Kale felt a flicker of frustration. This was just words. It was an excuse. He needed something real. He needed proof that this processing was anything more than just sitting and doing nothing. He had an idea. It was a little extreme, but he was their teacher. He had a right to understand his students. Your military files are linked to your academy records, Kyle stated. Every student here has served their people in a military or defense role. It is a requirement. The humans nodded. This was true. I am going to look at your combat logs, Kyle said. I want to see this processing in a real situation. I want to understand what it means. For the first time, he saw a change in their calm faces. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was something heavier. It was like the look a soldier gets when he knows a difficult mission is about to begin. It was resignation. Min finally looked up from the floor and met Kale's eyes. His gaze was steady and deep. Hannah spoke for all of them. You will see what you need to see, instructor. They bowed their heads slightly, a common human sign of respect, and left the classroom. They moved as quietly as they had sat. Kyle was alone. The silence they left behind was different now. It was not an empty silence. It was a silence that felt like it was waiting to be filled. He turned to his desk console. His finger hovered over the key that would access the classified human files. He felt a strange feeling, a mix of curiosity and something else, something like unease. He had wanted to understand the quiet humans. Now he was going to look into the world they came from. He took a deep breath and pressed the key. The door to Instructor Kale's quarters slid shut with a soft hiss, sealing him in a silence that felt heavy and new. The meeting with the three human students played over in his mind. Their calm faces, their quiet voices, the way they said processing as if it explained everything. He sat down at his personal console. The screen glowed with a soft blue light. He entered his security code. With a few more taps, he opened the student files. He found the military service records for Jin, Min, and Hana. They were not simple text reports. They were full-sensory combat logs. A small warning message appeared on the screen. Classified Human Defense Directorate, neural imprint data. Viewer discretion is advised. Kale hesitated for only a moment. Then he selected the file for Min. It was tagged with an operation name, Harvest Moon, Urban Pacification. He put on the neural headset. The world around him dissolved. The clean, quiet walls of his room vanished. He was suddenly somewhere else. He was seeing through Min's eyes. He was hearing through Min's ears. It was a city, but it was broken. Great buildings were piles of concrete and twisted metal. The sky was a dirty orange color full of smoke. The air smelled of dust and burning. He could feel the weight of a rifle in his own hands. It was Min's rifle. He could feel the rough fabric of a uniform collar against his neck. There was noise, distant booms, the rattle of gunfire, but it was all far away. What was close, what was immediate, was the silence. Min was not speaking. The soldiers near him were not speaking. There was no panic, no shouting. Kale, through Min's eyes, was looking down a long street. Rubble was everywhere. Min's head turned slowly, scanning. A stream of information flowed at the edge of his vision. Numbers and symbols, wind speed, atmospheric pressure, thermal readings from behind broken walls. It was too much data to read quickly, but Kale felt Min's mind absorbing it all effortlessly. Then Min moved. He did not run. He took slow, careful steps. He moved from the shadow of a broken wall to the shell of a burned-out vehicle. He paused. He was perfectly still. Kale could hear Min's breathing. It was slow and steady. In, out, there was no fear in the rhythm. They waited. A minute passed. Then another. Kale, as a viewer, felt a growing tension. He wanted to move. He wanted to act. But Min just waited. He was processing. He was watching the thermal signatures. He was listening to the far-off sounds of battle, judging their direction and meaning. A flicker of movement. 2 blocks down. A glint of light on a metal barrel. An enemy soldier was aiming from a second-story window. In that same second, Min was already moving. He had seen the glint a fraction of a second before Kale even registered it. Min's rifle came up. It was not a rushed, jerky motion. It was smooth. It was like part of a dance he had practiced 1,000 times. There was no sound from Min, no cry of target, no grunt of effort. There was only the soft click hiss of the rifle firing a single, precise energy pulse. The glint in the distant window vanished. Min immediately lowered the rifle and moved again. He did not look to see the result of his shot. He already knew. He slipped into a dark doorway and became still again. The stream of data in his vision updated. The thermal signature from the window was gone. It was just another piece of information. Kale pulled the headset off. He was breathing heavily. He was in his quiet room again. The silence was now deafening. He could still feel the ghost of the rifle in his hands. He could still smell the smoke. That was not what he expected. Galactic combat was loud. It was about coordinated charges, overwhelming firepower, and clear, shouted commands. What he had just seen was different. It was patient. It was quiet. It was efficient. It was hunting. He sat for a long time just thinking. He thought about Min sitting silently in class, his eyes on the floor. He was not being shy. He was doing the same thing he did in that broken city. He was assessing his environment. He was gathering data. The classroom was just another kind of battlefield. Kale felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He had been wrong about them, but he had only seen one log. He had to see more. He had to understand the scope of this. He put the headset back on. This time he selected Jin's file. The log was named Deep Scan Asteroid Belt Engagement. The world shifted again. This time there was no gravity. He was floating. He was in the cockpit of a small spacecraft. It was Jin's ship. The cockpit was dark, lit only by the soft glow of screens. Through the main window was the endless black of space dotted with thousands of rocky asteroids. The silence here was absolute. There was no air to carry sound. Jin was not speaking. The only noise was the faint hum of the ship's life support and the occasional beep from a console. Jin's hands moved over the controls with a slow, deliberate care. He was not flying. He was drifting. The ship's main engine was off. He was running on minimal power, making his ship as small and quiet as possible on enemy sensors. Kyle saw Jin's eyes scanning the screens. He was listening. His ship was picking up the faint communication signals of an enemy fleet hiding among the asteroids. He was not just hearing the words. He was analyzing the patterns, the tone of the commanders, the routine reports from their scouts. He was looking for a gap, a moment of carelessness. Hours seemed to pass. Kale felt the immense boredom and pressure of this kind of warfare. To just wait, to just listen, to do nothing. It was maddening. Then Jin saw it. A supply ship running behind schedule was taking a shortcut through a thin cluster of asteroids. It was a small mistake, but it was the mistake Jin had been waiting for. Jin's hands moved faster, but he was not starting the engine. He was not charging weapons. He was typing commands into a navigation computer. He was calculating trajectories, gravitational pulls, the composition of the asteroids. He targeted one specific asteroid, a large iron-rich rock. He programmed a single specialized torpedo. It was not designed to destroy the asteroid. It was designed to push it, to nudge it. He fired the torpedo. It was a silent flash in the void. The torpedo hit the asteroid and exploded, not with destructive force, but with a precise shockwave. The asteroid shifted its course. It began to drift. It bumped into a smaller asteroid, which bumped into another. It was a chain reaction, a slow-motion dance of celestial bodies. The enemy supply ship on its rushed path did not see the danger until it was too late. A cascade of rocks set in motion by Jin's single shot tumbled into its flight path. It tried to evade, but it was surrounded. The ship was pummeled, its hull breached, its engines crippled. Jin did not fire another shot. He did not cheer. He simply watched the data on his screen as the enemy ship's power signature faded away. Then he turned his ship and began a slow, quiet drift away from the area. The mission was over. He had used the environment itself as his weapon. He had not fought the enemy. He had let physics do the fighting for him. Kale took the headset off again. His hands were trembling. He looked around his room at its peace and order. He thought of Jin sitting in class, silent, watching the star map. He was not just a student. He was a pilot who could turn a silent asteroid belt into a weapon. The quiet in the classroom was not empty. It was the same quiet he had just experienced in space. It was the quiet of a mind calculating, waiting, and observing. It was the quiet before a storm. He had one log left, Hana's. He was almost afraid to see it. What could be more unsettling than a silent city hunter or a patient space pilot? He saw the name of her file. It was marked with the highest level of security. The tag was Vermilion Gate Final Stand. Kyle took a deep breath. He had to know. He put the headset on for the last time. The name of the file glowed in Kyle's vision. Vermilion Gate Final Stand. He felt a cold dread. This was not a simple patrol or a stealth mission. A final stand meant a battle against impossible odds. It was a name given to battles where survival was not expected. He selected the file. The world dissolved into chaos. He was on the bridge of a starship. But it was not the quiet cockpit of Jin's vessel. This ship was dying. Red alarm lights flashed, casting a bloody glow on everything. A harsh, clanging bell echoed through the metal halls. The smell of smoke and burnt wiring filled the air. He could feel the deck plates vibrating under his feet from nearby explosions. He was seeing through Hana's eyes. He could feel her heart beating, a steady, strong rhythm in her chest despite the panic all around her. He could feel the slight tremble in her hands, not from fear, but from adrenaline and fatigue. She was sitting in the command chair. Her uniform was smudged with dirt. A small cut on her forehead had dripped a line of blood down the side of her face. She ignored it. Through the main viewport, space was a nightmare. A vast enemy armada filled the stars. Their ships were like dark, jagged insects swarming. Bright lines of plasma fire shot past the viewport. One of their own ships, a fellow human frigate, exploded in a silent, brilliant flower of fire. "Report," Hana said. Her voice was calm. It was not a shout. It was a clear, firm command that cut through the noise of the alarms. A young officer at a console to her left yelled back, his voice cracking. "Shields are down to 10%. Engine 3 is gone. We have multiple hull breaches on decks 4 and 7. Kale could feel the wave of panic from the crew. He could see it in their wide eyes, in their shaking hands. They were looking at Hana. Their lives depended on her next words. This was the moment. This was when a commander was supposed to shout orders, to rally their crew with a brave speech, to scream in defiance at the enemy. Hana did none of that. She was silent. Her face, reflected in the viewport against the backdrop of the enemy fleet, was the same calm, neutral mask she wore in Kale's classroom. Her eyes were focused, her mouth a thin line. Kyle, seeing through her, could feel her mind working. It was not just processing tactical data. It was so much more. She was looking at the young officer who had reported. She was noting the fear in his eyes. She was calculating if he would hold it together. She decided he would. She gave him a small, almost invisible nod, a sign of trust. Her eyes moved to her tactical screen. She saw the positions of the enemy ships. Their formation was arrogant. They were grouped together, sure of their victory. They were chasing her retreating ships towards the orange and white swirl of a nearby gas giant planet. She was also processing other data. The fatigue levels of her engineering team, shown by their slow response times on her monitor. The remaining ammunition count for their last working gun. The political impact of this loss. If they all died here, what message would it send? What would it cost the human alliance? In the middle of the screaming alarms and the shaking ship, Hana's mind was a deep, placid lake, and in its quiet depths a plan began to form. It was a desperate, dangerous plan, a gamble. Her fingers flew across the console on her chair. They did not tremble. They moved with the deliberate focus of a concert pianist, playing a complex piece of music. She was not typing frantically. She was inputting commands with precision. "Helm," she said, her voice still calm. "New course. Plot a retreat vector towards the gas giant. Use the magnetosphere for sensor cover." The helmsman, a woman with a burned arm, looked back confused. "Captain, that gravity well, it's a trap. We won't be able to escape." "It's not for escaping," Hannah said, her eyes still on her screens. "It's for baiting." She opened a secure channel. Her voice was soft, but every word was clear. "All remaining units, this is command. Execute retreat pattern theta. I repeat, pattern theta. Draw them in. Do not, I repeat, do not break formation until my mark." Kyle watched as the few remaining human ships changed their course. They stopped trying to fight. They turned and began to run, flying in a tight, controlled group directly towards the giant planet. The enemy fleet, seeing what they thought was a final panicked flight, surged forward to finish them off. They followed the humans right into the outer layers of the planet's strong magnetic field. Hannah's ship shook violently as it entered the turbulent space near the gas giant. The view screen was filled with the beautiful, terrifying swirl of orange and white clouds. "Enemy vanguard is in the kill zone," the tactical officer reported, his voice a whisper. Hannah's hand hovered over a single red button on her console. It was not labeled with a word. It was labeled with a simple symbol, a star. She did not look at her crew. She looked at the enemy fleet on her screen, now tangled in the planet's magnetic field. She took one last slow breath. Her final command was a single whispered word: ignition. She pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to tear open. Hidden among the gas giant's upper atmosphere were thousands of small human mines. They were not explosive mines. They were energy mines. When Hannah sent the signal, they all activated at once. They used the planet's own volatile atmosphere as fuel. A wave of fire erupted from the gas giant. It was not an explosion. It was an ignition. For a few seconds, the gas giant became a second small star. A wave of pure energy, hotter than a sun, washed over the enemy vanguard. The enemy ships did not explode. They vaporized. They turned into light and then into nothing. The view screen went white, then black as the ship's sensors overloaded. When the view returned, a huge part of the enemy fleet was simply gone. Wiped clean. The bridge was utterly silent. The alarms had stopped. The only sound was the faint hum of the ship's struggling engines. Hannah slowly leaned back in her chair. She closed her eyes for just a second. Then she opened them. "Damage report," she said, her voice hoarse but still calm. The battle was not over, but the worst had passed. She had turned a certain defeat into a devastating victory. She had not done it with guns, but with a quiet, terrifying cleverness. Cale ripped the headset from his head. He stumbled away from his desk. His heart was pounding. He felt sick. He had just lived through the most horrifying and brilliant 5 minutes of command he had ever witnessed. The silence in his room was no longer just silence. It was the silence after the storm. It was the silence of Hannah's bridge. He finally understood. Completely. The classroom was not a place for them to show off. It was a place for them to observe, to calculate, to plan. Their silence was not emptiness. It was a weapon. It was the same focused calm that let Min wait for a perfect shot. The same patience that let Jin set a trap with a single asteroid. The same terrifying clarity that let Hannah use a planet to destroy a fleet. He thought of the other students, the loud Tellurians, the humming Vril. They were smart. They were talented, but they were playing a game. Jin, Min, and Hannah were not playing. They were soldiers who had learned to think in the quiet between life and death. And they were still thinking that way, even here in a peaceful classroom. The next morning, Instructor Cale walked to his classroom. The halls of the academy were the same as always. The same sounds, the same smells, the same students rushing to their lessons. But for Cale, everything felt different. The world had shifted. He had seen behind the curtain and he could not unsee it. He entered the classroom. The star map was already glowing in the center of the room. The Tellurian students were there, their voices loud and energetic as they discussed the previous day's lesson. The Vril were in their corner humming softly together. It was a normal day. Then his eyes found them, Jin, Min, and Hannah. They were sitting at their desks just as they always did. They were perfectly still, perfectly silent. But Cale did not see quiet students anymore. He saw the ghost of a soldier standing in a ruined city waiting in the shadows. He saw the calm focus of a pilot drifting in the silent dark, listening. He saw the steady hand of a commander on a burning bridge making a planet into a bomb. He saw the calm at the eye of the storm. He began the lesson. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. He presented a new problem on the star map. It was a complex scenario about a blockaded planet. How to get supplies through an enemy fleet without starting a full-scale war. As expected, the classroom erupted into noise. "The Tellurians were the loudest. We should use a feint," one of them declared, waving a long arm. "Attack their shipyards in another system. That will draw their fleet away." "No, that is too risky," argued another. "We should use small, fast blockade runners. They are hard to hit." The debate went back and forth. The Vril joined in, presenting a detailed plan using sensor ghosts and electronic deception. It was a good plan. It was clever. Cale listened, but his attention was on the three humans. He watched them. He saw their eyes moving following the arguments. He saw Min glance at the star map, then at the Tellurian who was speaking, then back at the map. He saw Jin's fingers tracing a faint line on his desk as if calculating a course. He saw Hana, her head tilted, listening to every word, her expression unreadable. They were not just sitting there. They were, as they had said, processing. They were gathering data. The problem on the star map was one piece. The proposed solutions were another. The confidence of the students, the flaws in their logic, the gaps in their planning. It was all information. Fuel for their quiet minds. The Tellurian proposal for a direct feint attack was gaining popularity. Many of the other students were nodding. It was a bold, aggressive plan. It fit the way most galactic species thought about war. Cale knew this was the moment. He took a slow breath. He felt the weight of what he had learned. He looked at Jin. "Jin," Cale said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the chatter. The room grew quiet. All eyes turned to the instructor, then to the human student who never spoke. Jin looked up. His face was calm. There was no surprise in his eyes. It was as if he had been waiting for this. "You have been observing," Cale said. He chose his words carefully. He did not say sitting silently. He said observing, giving the action the respect it deserved. "What is your assessment of the feint attack proposal?" Jin's gaze moved from Cale to the star map. He did not stand up. He did not raise his voice. When he spoke, his words were as quiet as always, but in the sudden silence of the room, they were as clear as glass. "The feint is tactically sound," Jin began. The Tellurians who had proposed it puffed out their chests slightly. But Jin was not finished. "But it is based on an incomplete dataset." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "The enemy commander at the blockade is Admiral Vorlak," Jin continued. A few students nodded. This was basic information in the scenario. His personal history shows he is cautious. He does not respond to feints. In 3 similar historical battles, he held his position. He would not move his fleet to protect the shipyards. He would send a small, fast response team instead. A few of the students shifted in their seats. They had not reviewed the commander's personal profile. Jin was not done. His eyes were still on the map. "There is another problem. The local star in this system is a variable star. It has predictable but strong periods of solar radiation. In 27 hours, it will enter a high radiation phase. This will cause a 3% atmospheric refraction on all long-range sensor scans." He looked back at the Tellurians. "Your feint attack would be detected 4.7 seconds earlier than your projections account for because of this refraction. Their point defense systems would have time to lock on. Your losses would be over 60%. The room was utterly still. The Tellurians who had been so confident were now staring, their mouths slightly open. They had not calculated the effect of the local star. It was a tiny detail, but Jin had seen it. He had processed it. Cale felt a chill. This was exactly what he had seen in the logs. The patience to find the one small detail that changed everything. "And what would you do instead?" Cale asked, his voice soft. Jin's answer was immediate. "I would not attack. I would use the radiation pulse. I would send the supply ships through the magnetic dust rings in Sector Theta. The radiation and the dust would scramble enemy sensors completely. They would be blind for a 12-minute window. The supplies would get through without a single shot being fired. Silence. It was a brilliant solution. It was not flashy. It was not about courage or strength. It was about using the environment. It was about understanding the problem on a deeper level than anyone else. It was the solution of a pilot who had used an asteroid as a weapon. Kyle simply nodded. An excellent assessment. Thank you, Jin. He looked around the room. The other students were looking at Jin, and then at Min and Hana with new eyes. The silence of the humans was no longer seen as emptiness. It was now seen as depth, a deep, dark ocean where dangerous and clever things lived. The lesson continued, but the energy in the room had changed. The loud debates were more thoughtful. The other students would sometimes glance at the three humans as if waiting for them to speak again. Kyle did not call on Min or Hana. He did not need to. The point had been made. The message had been received. When the class ended, the students filed out. The Tellurians were quiet for once, talking in low murmurs. The Vril's hum was more thoughtful. Jin, Min, and Hana stood and gathered their things with the same quiet efficiency as always. As they walked past his desk, Kale gave a small, respectful nod. It was not a nod a teacher gives a student. It was the nod one soldier gives to another. Hana met his eyes and returned the nod. There was no smile, no triumph. There was only a quiet understanding. He had seen them. He knew what they were, and now he respected the silence for what it truly was. It was not a lack of something. It was a presence. It was the sound of a mind at work. The most terrifying and powerful sound in the universe when you finally learned how to listen for it. The days that followed were different in the advanced tactical analysis class. The change was quiet like a shift in the wind. The other students did not suddenly become friends with the three humans. They did not start long conversations with them. The humans were still quiet. They still sat silently observing, but the way the other students looked at them had changed. The Tellurians no longer glanced at Jin, Min, and Hana with pity or confusion. Now their looks were thoughtful and sometimes a little wary. The Vril's humming sometimes took on a new, curious tone when their group was near the humans' desks. The classroom was no longer just a place of learning about tactics. It had become a place of learning about each other. One afternoon, the lesson involved a live simulation. The students were split into two teams. They would command virtual fleets against each other in a computer-generated star system. It was a famous academy exercise called the Twin Suns Dilemma. Kale watched as the teams formed. Jin, Min, and Hana were, of course, on the same team. Their team also had two Tellurians and a Vril. The other team was a mix of the remaining students. The simulation began. The other team moved quickly. They were aggressive. They sent scout ships ahead. They set up a strong defensive line around a key planet. They communicated constantly, their voices a stream of commands and reports. The team with the humans was much quieter. The two Tellurians on their team started talking fast, suggesting a direct assault to break the enemy line. The Vril hummed and presented a complex flanking maneuver. Jin, Min, and Hana did not speak. They were looking at their own screens, their faces calm. They were processing the simulation data, the layout of the stars, the composition of the enemy fleet. The chatter from the other team's open communications. The two Tellurians on their team grew frustrated. "We must act," one of them said, his voice tense.
"They are getting stronger by the minute."
Hana looked up from her screen. She did not look at the Tellurian. She looked at Min and Jin. It was a look that lasted less than a second. A silent conversation passed between them. Then Hana gave a single small nod. Min turned to the two Tellurians and the Vril. His voice was low and even. "We have a plan. Please input these coordinates into your navigation systems." He sent a set of numbers to their consoles. The coordinates did not point at the enemy fleet. They pointed to an empty, dark region of space between the two suns. The Tellurians were confused. "This is nowhere." "There is nothing there." "There will be," Jin said quietly. He was already typing commands into his console. Kale, watching from the instructor's platform, felt a thrill of understanding. He had seen this before. This was not a plan of direct force. This was a plan of environment, of patience. The human team's fleet began to move. They did not fly towards the enemy. They broke formation and scattered, each ship heading on a different, seemingly random course. It looked like chaos. It looked like a retreat. The other team, seeing this, laughed. They thought the human team was falling apart. They thought they had won. They pushed their fleet forward, eager to chase down and destroy the scattered ships. They did not notice the small, specialized probes that Jin's ship had launched. The probes were not weapons. They were emitters. They flew to the coordinates Min had provided, the empty space between the two suns. This region of space was not truly empty. It was filled with the powerful, interacting gravitational fields and radiation of the twin stars. It was a turbulent, dangerous place for ships. The human team's ships continued their seeming retreat, drawing the enemy fleet closer and closer to this chaotic zone. Then, Jin sent the activation signal. The probes came to life. They began emitting a powerful, coordinated energy field. It was a subtle thing. It did not create an explosion. Instead, it amplified the natural gravitational turbulence of the space between the suns. On the enemy team's view screens, warning lights suddenly flashed. "Gravitational shear!" "Massive disruption," one of their players yelled. It was too late. Their ships, caught in the amplified turbulence, were thrown out of control. Their formations broke apart. Ships bumped into each other. Their weapons could not aim. It was like being in a terrible storm. At that moment, the human team's ships, which had seemed to be running away, turned around. They had not been retreating. They had been positioning themselves. Now, from perfect firing positions all around the edges of the chaotic zone, they opened fire. The enemy fleet, helpless and tangled in the gravitational storm, could not fight back. One by one, their ships were marked as destroyed by the simulation. The game was over. The human team had won, and they had not lost a single ship. The simulation room was silent. The members of the losing team sat at their consoles, stunned. They had been defeated by a part of the star map they had thought was useless. One of the Tellurians from the winning team turned to look at Min. His expression was full of a new, deep respect. You used the suns," he said, his voice full of wonder. "You used the suns themselves." Min simply nodded. The vril from their team stepped forward. It hummed a long, complex series of notes at Hana. The translation device on her console lit up. The words appeared on the screen. "Your silence holds great gravity." We did not know how to listen for it. Hana looked at the vril and gave another small, respectful nod. Kale ended the class. As the students left, the usual loud chatter was replaced by quiet, thoughtful discussions. The victory was not celebrated with shouts. It was absorbed with contemplation. Jin, Min, and Hana were the last to leave. As they walked towards the door, Kyle spoke. "That was well done," he said. "It was a solution I had not seen before." Jin stopped and turned. "Thank you, instructor. It was the only logical path." "I see that now," Kale said. He looked at the three of them. These quiet, deadly, brilliant students from a species the galaxy was only just beginning to understand. "I think we are all learning." The three humans bowed their heads slightly and left the room. Kale stood alone in the quiet classroom. The star map was dark. He thought about the first day when their silence had frustrated him. He had thought they had nothing to say. Now he knew the truth. They had everything to say. They just said it in a different language. A language of patience, of observation, of perfect, calculated action. A language written not in words, but in the space between them. The galaxy was a noisy, busy place. But humanity had learned a powerful lesson. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to be silent, to watch and to wait. And when you finally move, the whole universe listens.